Welcome to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, mystery lovers, pill seekers, and conspiratorialists all across the fruited plain. This is Snake Bros, Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10x10x10 tangent cube of science. Snake Bros! Snake Bros! So we got some news stuff for you. We got some listeners shit and some updates on things we've been doing with the podcast. First of all, for all of you who may be confused looking at your feeds recently about what the F is going on with the feed, we decided that we were dumb for not giving the episodes some kind of descriptive name rather than just Brothers of the Serpent episode 145, you know? So like I went back and I tried to do it all at once. I went back and went through every episode and changed the name from Brothers of the Serpent episode whatever to episode whatever, and then give it some kind of descriptive name. Because I realized when I was looking at my podcast feed that I'm more inclined to click on one if I can kind of see just in the title what it's about. You know, if it's like, you know, episode da-da-da, Bigfoot and Sasquatch. And I'm like, okay, and I know what it's about, you know, just from that. Or pyramids. So I did that with our show. So that's why if you were updating your feed and noticing that everything was changing, that's what it was. I was basically changing the names for all the episodes. And there's a couple in there that I haven't done it to yet because they don't have a description yet, so I need to go in and listen to the show and write a description and put in keywords, and then I can change the name on that one. So I think it's like episode 23 and 24 need to be done. But other than that, just wanted to describe that, explain that to you guys so you understand what's going on there. But yeah, we're always improving here. We're always changing stuff. Whether that's improving, we don't know, but we're changing stuff.
It's improvement.
Another thing in the with some inside baseball or podcast news itself with the show is we are very proud actually to announce a new partnership we have. Like, this is badass. Okay, so a website that we have mentioned a couple of times in the show, we've actually read from some of their articles directly on the show, is Mind the Hive, mindthehive.com. They're badass. They're a brand new website about all these mysterious topics. They have some of the most comprehensive, well-researched articles on these topics that I've ever seen, and Kyle and I've been reading about this stuff for years and years and years, and like these articles that they've posted on stuff on topics that we already know about. Their information is just great. The way they put it together, their website is like slick and totally modern. With all the best, like when you open it up, things start sliding around and moving. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah. It's a beautiful site.
Yeah, it's a beautiful site. Mindthehive.com, and we are now. The owners got in contact with us. The guys who run the site got in contact with us, and we've been talking back and forth, and we're entering into a partnership with them. So we'll know more about what that means in the future. But for now, I just wanted to go ahead and announce it because they're awesome. So if you go to the Brothers of the Serpent blog, you'll see up on the upper right, in partnership with mindthehive.com, and you can click on their logo there to go to their website. So I just wanted to go ahead and announce that too. And we should have some big stuff coming from this. It's going to be awesome. So just wanted to go ahead and let you guys know about that. Right?
Yeah. Fellow snakes.
That's right.
Oh, snakes in the grass.
That's right. Snakes are good at minding the hive.
Yeah. We should make a logo with a snake wrapped around a beehive.
So, what do we have in the news? We got some news. Like, okay, first of all, flat Earth guy fucking shoots himself towards space with a steam.
Yeah.
Like, that is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I see all these stories and they kind of seem like they're making fun of the guy, but you know what? Fuck them. Like, that dude is badass. Like, I totally disagree about the flat Earth, but at least he's trying to find out for himself. He's like, I don't believe the government. I don't believe fucking NASA, never a straight answer. So he's going to launch himself up there to see for himself. And, like, I've seen stories before in the months past where he was supposed to launch and then something didn't work. And you know more about this than I do. You were talking about the pressure problems.
Yeah.
But, like, and the launch would always fail, and so the stories were always just ruthless, making fun of the guy. And then he comes out and actually launches and goes like 1,800 feet up or whatever, and then comes back down and parachutes. And they report the story like, so he launched himself towards space and blah blah blah. And they're like, I'm like, fuck you guys, you've been ruthlessly making fun of him, and like, you know, every time he misses a launch, you're like, of course he can't fucking rocket himself towards space, and then he does it, and you just completely ignore the fact that you've been skirt dripping him this whole time. So fuck you guys.
Yeah, so he has. I wanted to look more into this. As a matter of fact, we want to talk to the guy.
Yeah, we want to talk to him
because he has a steam powered rocket.
Yeah,
and that is like that's freaking awesome. But one of the details about this launch, he still had a problem, but he was determined to do it anyway because of all the shit talking.
Yeah.
So they were supposed to be up to like 350 psi or something, and it kept leaking. And so what they did was they raised the temperature and tried to hold it at least 340, and they were able to do it. And so they just basically, with the leak in the rocket and everything, they're like, go, boom. It's like, that's freaking amazing. And he had this mobile home that he'd rigged with this massive like launch pad and all that kind of shit.
Yeah, just drives it out there.
Yeah, it stands up this thing. It's badass.
Yeah.
And then he's like, it was a pretty hard landing, and he's like, oh, I'll feel out in the morning. I'm going to go home to my cats.
I may not be able to get out of bed tomorrow, but shit. Yeah.
Dude, yeah, props to that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great story. I was really, really proud of him for being able to finally launch it. Because I had seen the stories before about his rocket, and they were just like,
what was the guy's name?
I can't remember his name either. But everybody knows. I mean, it's been all over the news. You know, flat earther launches himself towards space. Steam powered rocket is a fucking great story. Like, you can't make this shit up, ladies and gentlemen. You cannot make this shit up.
Oh man. That's still.
This is why aliens are terrified of us.
Oh yeah.
Because we will fucking build a steam powered rocket and just shoot ourselves towards space trying to get there. They're like, man.
Mad Mike Hughes.
Mad Mike Hughes. That's right. I saw the Mad Mike. Mad Mike.
And he's like 62 or something.
Yeah. He's great.
Yeah.
The other was it Mad Mike? Madman. I think it was Madman Mike. I think he was a similar guy, but he was young. Threw himself into a bunch of spinning magnets that he thought was going to be a time travel device. He was on Coast to Coast like years and years and years ago. Like he built all this. He was an electrician. He built all this crazy shit that he kept blowing the power for his entire block and stuff like that. And he was kind of known in his community. And then Art Bell got him on the Coast to Coast show to talk to him about it. And he had this idea that he thought he had built something that teleported something through time. You know, and he was like, he thought that he could build a big one and throw himself into it, right? That was his immediate thought. It was like, as soon as I saw it, he had a Jacob's ladder, and he said there was a laser and a bunch of like spinning magnets around it. I can't remember, but the whole thing was making this sort of shimmery. The Jacob's ladder was making this sort of shimmery, like, you know, force field looking thing or whatever. He tossed a screw at it. He said he threw a screw at it, and the screw went, and when it impacted the shimmery area, he said it disappeared, and then he heard it like hit the wall of his shop, like way far away, and he thought that it like teleported through time. And so his immediate thought was like, I could build a big one and jump into it.
Oh my god.
That's what he immediately thought. It was a great story.
Portal.
Yeah, portal. And he disappeared.
Really?
Yeah, actually, it was weird because people got, of course, when he got on Art Bell's show, like a lot of people were fascinated by him. And he Art Bell said very stupidly gave out his actual phone number on the show. Okay, so this is a national. So he and then when he got back on the show a couple of months later, he told Art, he's like, yeah, that was kind of dumb because like he said for days after that his phone was ringing off the hook, and he wanted, you know, like he was like, and I felt obligated to talk to these people because these people calling him up and asking him questions, and he was like, I was up for days, the phone wouldn't stop ringing, I'd answer, and these people would ask me questions, and he's talking to him. But apparently somebody got interested enough into him to like to give him shop space and enough money like to buy the equipment that he said that he needed, these huge electromagnet, or actually it was a wrapper that he could
build.
Yeah, so that he could build his own, right? And so he was like, yeah, this guy, he had this big shop that was basically an empty building that this guy owned. That he said, hey man, you can use this building. It's in the town where you're in. Yeah, that's his name, Markham.
Mike Markham.
Yeah. So it was Mad Mike. Yeah, so he fucking had this shop, and he was building these enormous electromagnets, and he was like, you know, there were big round ones, and there was
Wonder how old he was, because maybe Mike Hughes is actually that guy.
time traveled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There was I know this is probably not true. This is like urban legend stuff, but like he kind of just disappeared after the second interview with Art Bell. Like nobody could find him after that. And it may be because he fled from celebrity he didn't want. But there was this really strange story about in California, like in the 1920s, there was this weird story about a person in a rubber suit that just appeared on the beach that had no identifications on him or whatever on a beach. He was like, they found a dead body on the beach and it was wearing a full rubber, like a neoprene suit or whatever, and he was dead. And people were speculating that was him, that he had dove into his fucking time machine and like teleported it, killed him, and then he landed on the beach in California in the 1920s. It's fucking hilarious, dude. I don't think that I think somebody did find him later on, but anyway, it was a very interesting story. So there's lots of mad Mikes are mad, basically. Yeah. They shooting themselves for space and jumping through time.
Yeah.
Those guys should hook up.
He launched himself from Death Valley and lived to tell the tale.
That's right. All right, so anything else in the news? I have one.
Yeah, so he needs to do it from the top of a mountain. That'll give him a little boost. Yeah.
Yeah, could be. You mean like because he's closer to space?
Yeah,
on a mountain.
Yeah, it's for space. But yeah, the steam rocket thing, that like straight up reminded me of some Tesla shit. I'd love to talk to the guy
yeah. I want to know how much fuel like a steam rocket has to use water, right, to make the steam. So like you have to carry the water, and water's heavy as fuck. So like how much do you need to kind of?
Yeah, I don't
that's
know.
what I was interested in, is the logistics of it. Like where's the water coming from? Do you have a tank of water in your rocket, and like water's so heavy, like you know. Whereas if you were just, but on the other hand, like
maybe you should like combine the steam with like, you know, some solid fuel and liquid fuel. So just basically get some vinegar and baking soda and heat the vinegar up to where it's trying to steam, and then like start launching himself, and then dump the baking soda into it. That'd be badass. Yeah. Make it all the way to space on steam rocket, vinegar, and baking soda.
Yeah, and he should launch himself from a volcano, because it's every science project has a volcano with baking soda and vinegar.
But it's still freaking awesome that a guy just like in his garage can like build all this shit and actually freaking get inside it. And
I think he was smart to use. I think that the fuel is heavy, but I think he was smart to use steam, because you're just way less. It's way less danger of like blowing yourself up. Yeah, and like we can't really get our hands on that kind of fuel. You know, get a bunch of liquid nitrogen and shit. And solid. You know, the solid fuel for the boosters for the shuttle was like incredibly potent. But maybe you could call up those model rocket companies and be like, just build me some giant ones.
Yeah.
These humongous like red tubes on the side of his rocket. with the parachute at the top.
Yep. He needs to put a GoPro on the next one.
Yeah, no kidding, right? And I wanted to ask him too, like, did he have radio equipment? Did he, like, did he have, or was he just using his cell phone? Like, that's not going to work if you go to space, It reminded me of old Highland stories I used to read. You know, in these really old Highland stories where he wrote them in the 40s, where these people go out and basically do the same thing out in the desert, and they just build their own freaking rocket and go to the moon. You know?
Yeah. So I have a couple of articles here that I just bookmarked. One of them is these two pilots who saw a UFO. Independently reported back to it's almost the same story as the deal that we, you know, the audio sound bites we played a couple episodes back, where one pilot reports, you know, seeing something strange or whatever, and then he basically gives a direction and a location of it, and so then the the
ATCs start.
yeah, they find another plane in the vicinity, and they radio out to them like, hey, do you see anything coming? And a little while later, they're like, yeah,
Yeah.
they actually see it. And I'm trying to pull up the story right now.
It was like it flew over top of them, right?
Yeah, it was like 1,000 feet above them, and it was very big. They were saying it was a large signature.
Yeah, it had a huge reflection or whatever is what you're saying. Yeah.
Man, the story's not loading.
Is it? Are you hotspotting?
Yeah,
That may be why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, there weren't a whole lot of details, but yeah, both pilots like reported the same object. Here it is. 2 pilots report seeing UFO in southern Arizona skies. Phoenix pilots flying on 2 separate aircraft reported seeing an unidentified flying object over Arizona last month. It took place over southern Arizona around 3:30 p.m. on February 24th between the New Mexico border and the Sonoran Desert National Monument, which is about 40 miles from Phoenix. Let's see.
Yeah, and Sonora is famous for that kind of shit.
Yeah, so a commercial pilot flying a jet for American Airlines said the object was above 40,000 feet and had a big reflection. Quote, I don't know what it was, the pilot told Albuquerque Air Route Traffic Control Center. It wasn't an airplane, but it was. ... The path was going in the opposite direction.
Yeah, it was. Well, it was going the other way.
Oh, okay. I thought he was like, it wasn't an airplane, but it was. But yeah, what you're saying makes more sense. So the air traffic control told an aircraft on a similar flight path to let him know if anything passes over him in the next few miles. A few minutes later, the pilot confirmed that something passed over his aircraft. Quote, don't know what it was, but it was at least 3,000 feet above us, he said. It passed right over top of us. Can you tell if it was in motion or just hovering? The traffic control asked. Negative. I don't know if it was a weather balloon or whatnot, the pilot said. It had a big reflection several thousand feet above us going the opposite direction.
And then somebody eventually breaks in on the radio and says, it was a UFO, right? Wasn't that in the story too?
It says, after questions about whether it was a Google balloon, another voice responded and said it was a UFO.
Yeah. Just like some random dude, it was a UFO.
Snake Bros!
Yeah, it's one of you listeners out there. You guys fucking...
Why it doesn't give a description of who that was? Another voice responded. It was probably from the aircraft.
It may have been a small, a small plane. That,
It was a UFO.
Yeah, he just comes in and it was a UFO. It's just like he's tired of listening to them, pussyfoot around the whole thing. Obviously, it was a UFO.
Arizona had more than 4,500 reported UFO sightings from 2001 to 2015.
Yeah.
And it was also home to one of the most infamous UFO cases of all time, the Phoenix Lights.
Yeah.
I never looked that up. Do you know anything
Oh my
about
God,
it?
the Phoenix Lights case is amazing. Yeah. Like briefly, the in Phoenix, this huge so it was an array of lights, but it happened at dusk. So when it was first starting, there was still enough light in the sky for people to see. Okay, so it wasn't like pitch black or whatever. So there were these lights that were like in a delta or a chevron shape, right? So they're like like a chevron you would see on a military guy's patch, right? But they're
like birds flying in formation.
Yeah, but the lights are the underside of some enormous craft. I mean, and they said it was enormous, multiple football fields in length. And it came real slow over top of Phoenix. And I mean, thousands and thousands of people saw it. Okay.
Wow.
Just cruising real slow. This humongous chevron-shaped craft with these lights underneath it. I mean, even the
red lights. Red lights.
I don't know. I never saw what color, but I think
I'm
that
having this picture in my mind of these red lights.
they may have been red because, like, later on there was a bunch of bullshit with the military trying to claim that they were flares. They were like, "Oh, well, we were doing this exercise out in the desert and we dropped flares," and people were like, "Those were not flares." Yeah, they're
Oh no, they're white. Brett just posted a picture.
yeah. Look how big that is.
Dang.
So, and later on, the governor of the state even admitted to have seeing it. He said that he saw it coming down, and he was like it was enormous. And people have tried to say that it might be some secret program that we've got, but like, if it's a secret program we got, why did they fly it over Phoenix?
Yeah.
And we don't have anything like that. This thing was moving slow, and it was enormous. you know, and it doesn't have propellers and shit like that. There's no known way of it, you know, it looked like a delta wing craft. Like, in other words, like, think of the B-2 bomber. It basically just this delta shape. But those things have to haul ass to have lift. This thing was just kind of, you know, it was real slow, just cruising really slowly, and it was, and there's just nothing we have that's anything like that. And you can see in the pictures, you look at the city, and then you see the size of the fucking lights up in the sky, and you're just like, okay, that thing is humongous.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the Phoenix Lights. It was a very famous case.
It also didn't make any.
Yeah, it made almost no noise. Yeah. Yeah. The only other case that I know of that was similar is actually happened really close to here in Stephenville. They saw something very much like that. This enormous craft, and it came in over Stephenville, and like all these people saw it from the whole town.
And, you know, Stephenville's a dry county, so...
So, yeah, they were like, well, they were drunk. Oh, yeah, so it was March 13th, 1997, the Phoenix Lights. Thank you, Mr. Show Observer. Yeah. We got some good pictures of it we can put up in the show notes. But yeah, that was a fantastic case. It was one of the best cases because of so many witnesses. So many of them were officials, and the police saw it, and just like all kinds of stuff. It was crazy. So
that's cool.
It was the Anunnaki.
Yeah. Okay, so I have one other annoying story here that I just want to sculptor. Let's see.
Kyle Sculptor power.
Yeah. No. Humans are sleepwalking into a mass extinction of species not seen since the dinosaurs. Okay, that's the headline.
Good grief.
Now, we've been reporting on the burn papers.
Yeah.
And the Comet Research Group.
Yeah.
There is, and this story comes out. I guess this was last week.
Yeah.
It's like we were just reading about this mass extinction event that was like incredible, like hardcore, like,
yeah,
in comparison to the dinosaur extinction event.
Yeah.
Which was the Younger Dryas.
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Wait, which one?
I'm sorry, the impact or whatever it was, the extinction event that killed all the mammoths and all the...
Yeah, okay.
There was like all these different animals and all this...
Yeah.
That was a massive...
Yeah. It was a huge
global extinction event.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like not quite as large as the KT event, which is what they called it, wanting to kill off the dinosaurs, but close. So.
Yeah, so they're trying to claim that we're sleepwalking into a mass extinction event of species not seen since the dinosaurs. Like, so it's going to be even greater than that one.
Yeah.
Where like, what was the percentage of megafauna?
In North America, it killed off over 70% of all mammals over 100 pounds. Yeah, I think Randall Carlson says to have the same die-off today, you would have to kill every animal on the planet that is over 100 pounds, and that includes all humans because we are megafauna.
So, it's very first line. Man-made global change is threatening the diversity of different creatures that have taken millennia to evolve to live in niche habitats. And they go immediately into the coral reefs, okay, which are all shallow marine ecosystems. And, you know, we're looking at this recent extinction event in the like after the Younger Dryas, whatever, where the sea levels were like 400 feet lower. Right. So all of those coral reefs that they're claiming right in the beginning of this story that took millennia to evolve, weren't here 12,000 years ago.
Right, because the coral can only grow down to like 100 feet, right, below sea level.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the sea level was 400 feet lower.
Right.
So all of the coral reefs that are there now weren't there.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
They were on dry land,
and the ones that were there before are all dead. Because they're now 500 feet below.
That's right.
That's right.
And so I'm not going to read this whole story. I'm just warning you out there that this.
And like another annoying thing on there, what did they say that these creatures that have evolved for niche? What did it say?
Creatures that have taken millennia to evolve to live in niche habitats.
Yeah. So anything that lives in a niche habitat is already on its way to extinction.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the most annoying things about this is like if you're not adaptable, you are going extinct already.
Yeah. Global warming and rising sea levels threaten to wipe out many species that cannot adapt to change quickly enough in the blink of an eye. Yeah, this happened already, and you claim that there weren't advanced civilizations that lived back then, so WTF, man.
Yeah. How did it happen? Yeah.
Okay, so it's possible to find coral at depths of 300 feet, but reef-building corals grow poorly below 60 to 90 feet.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the reef building ones that they're concerned about because the reef building corals end up building the atolls, and then the atolls have all these little niche animals on them. You know?
Yeah, so this is just a big, I don't understand it. I'm not able to kind of get into or understand how like groups of scientists can do this while just like
Totally ignoring.
overlooking this crazy shit that happened in our, like recent past, geologically speaking.
Yeah. Well, I think that like most of the global warming stuff is based on a lot of it's based on like very carefully choosing the starting point of their data in order to be able to say certain things, right? Like they pick to claim that there's warming for the period now. They start at the end of the medieval of the little ice age.
Yeah.
So that everything's really freaking cold, right? Yeah. They start there, and so they can say, "Look how it's warmed ever since." Like, well, yeah, you started at the end of the ice age.
Yeah. There was also a recent story. I don't have it in front of me, but it was a pretty large group of scientists that are now warning, like, it's actually cooling.
Yeah, I saw that too. Yeah. And it might be because of the sun.
Yeah, we're about to go into like a serious like solar minimum, and they're like the sun. There may be like some massive global cooling because
it could be that the Earth is warm because of the sun.
Yeah,
and the sun's cooling down. We might cool down too.
That's right.
Fuck. Yeah. Okay. So I have this news story that is. This is just weird. Okay. This is like that one was definitely needed to be scripted, but this one is just. Okay. Here's the headline: Dead ants keep falling mysteriously out of this girl's eyes. Okay. Whenever you feel like you're having a bad day, just feel lucky that you don't have dead ants pouring from your eyes.
Oh man.
This could always get a lot worse. Just ask this poor girl from the southwest Indian state of Karnataka. The Times of India reports that an 11-year-old girl named Ashwini from the town of has some sort of bizarre infestation causing tiny dead ants to fall from her eyes every day. Worst of all, they have no idea what's causing it or how to stop it. Her bizarre condition was first noticed by her parents after she complained of itching and burning in her eyes. Her parents found a dead ant in her eye and removed it and believed the problem was over. However, the symptoms continued and more dead ants were found on her eyes and face. That's when her parents sought medical help. When doctors pulled back her eyelids to examine her eyes, they discovered a tiny dead ant caught between the girl's lower eyelid and her eyeball. 5 or 6 ants are found in her eyes each day, and about 60 ants have fallen out so far, all of them dead. One theory is that the ants crawled into the girl's head through her ears while she was sleeping. IB Times of India reports that this case is eerily similar to a 2016 incident in which another Indian girl, this one 12 years old, had to have hundreds of ants removed from her head. The treating physician in that case, Dr. Jawar Talsania, told Times of India that the girl's case is very challenging, as I have never seen such a case nor found it in medical history. It's just some kind of disgusting new medical or entomological phenomenon, or just bad tabloid journalism running out of ideas. As we continue to poison and destroy the natural world, blah, 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 blah.
Jesus Christ.
Anyway, there's ants in her face.
All right, so snake facts. A couple of snake facts here. So snakes can get mites, and when they get these little mites, will be, crawling around on their bodies, on their scales and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And people that own snakes, if the snake gets a mite, you start noticing some mites on their body. Like one of the ideas is, well, I'll give them a bath, put the snake in the water. Well, when you do that, the mites run to the snake's eyes, and they go under the eyelid, and they just like crowd in there all around the snake's eye, and then you can't get them out.
Ugh.
They're really
That's
tiny.
terrible.
So you have to take them to the vet, and the vet has to like go in there and like scrape around the inside of the scales that are covering the outside of the eye to get the mites out. So, just saying.
So she should not take
snake
baths.
Yeah. Yeah, so when she takes baths, all the ants
Are running up into her eyes.
running up into her eyes.
Because she's really a snake. She probably listens to Snake Bros.
No, so the other thing I was thinking is like, yeah, so when she's sleeping, you know, they might be going for water.
Yeah.
And so they're like they're going in there to get water, and then they get trapped or whatever. And
Yeah, that's really interesting.
so then
But there must be something maybe with her tears that is attracting them. Like maybe if they tested her tears, if she has like some high sugar content in her tears or whatever.
that's interesting.
You know,
Yeah.
like. But it's weird that they keep showing up. Like she's in the hospital now, and they're still coming out of her eyes
Yeah,
and shit.
but the ear idea is actually pretty good because
Your sinuses
like,
are connected to your eyes.
You can imagine that. Yeah, like the ants go down in tiny little tunnels and
Yeah.
roll around.
But seriously, like who?
They should be coming out of her ears too.
Yeah, and her nose.
That's right. That's really weird.
Yeah,
But-
India, folks.
Yeah. India.
There's a place there's a bunch of weird little villages in India, like the place with all the twins. Have you heard about that village?
I think you've told me about it.
Yeah, there's a village where, like like they've got pictures of the entire village. Like it's a small place, you know. It's got like hundreds of people.
Yeah, where you can take a picture of the entire
of the
thing.
entire of everybody that lives there. But it looks when you see the pictures, like there's like hundreds of people all together in the photograph. But when you're initially looking at it, it doesn't look like there's that many people until you realize that most of them look like other people in the picture. Like it looks like a bunch of the same people.
Yeah.
And it's because the village is full of twins and triplets and shit like
Wow,
that.
that's weird.
Yeah, and they're identical. Like these are not paternal, you know, can be brother and sister type twins. They're identical twins. So this is like the maternal kind that are really, really rare. And no one knows why this is happening. Like just in that village, and it's only from people. Like if you moved there, it doesn't happen to you.
There is much to be learned by watching the
I can't read it.
Kodini,
Exile.
India.
220 sets of twins and 2,000 families. And that's way above the global average of twin occurrence. Like way, way, way above.
Like there's all kinds of animals that always have, you know, just
Multiple, yeah.
multiple babies in the same.
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
true.
Like
but we
weird
don't-
that we only have one.
Yeah.
So I wonder if maybe we started out where we had like multiple children.
But even like if you have like a litter of kittens, but they're not twins really. They're, you know, right?
Yeah,
And
okay.
they don't look the same.
Well, there's usually a runt.
I think that happens with twins too. Like there's always one that's sort of more dominant than the other.
Yeah. Well, we had one in here.
Yeah.
Last
Did
show.
were we talking to him about that on the show, or was he telling us about that afterwards?
I
About the
think
twin
we talked
stuff.
about it on the show.
Where he was saying that like Ty used to translate for him,
Oh no.
and like he wouldn't say anything, but Ty would just tell his mom like he wants this.
Yeah. And he was always right, man.
Yeah, like they could. Because he said well we did have the twin speak for a while. Like he wouldn't say anything, but Ty would do what he wanted. He'd tell his parents, yeah, he wants this.
Well, I was just gonna ask you, like, we had one in here, so which one was the runt? Now that you've seen him.
It's hard to tell because he's been around the world and he's going to go to space.
Oh yeah.
But I'm pretty sure it was Ty. What does runt mean in this context?
I don't know.
All right, so what time we got here? What's going on with the time?
Oh.
No, we're not.
Yeah, we're over time.
Yeah, so we need to take a break, which is good because I thought we needed to take a break. So we're going to take a break and we'll come back and we've got some really interesting stuff we've been thinking about. We're going to tell you guys about, and the Dyatlov Pass incident, which is coming up too. And very very strange. And did you say sex? Snakes.
Don't care
by 10 by 10. Tangent Cube of Science. I don't care when I get out of here. Welcome back to Snake Bros podcast. Talking about a bunch of shit. We were done with all that stuff we were talking about. We're talking about new stuff.
Yeah. I forgot about this, but I wanted to bring this up and kind of go through this real quick before you go into your big topic that you've got, because you got a badass topic, and this might tie into that possibly. But it's a really interesting. It's basically another site. So like we've one of the things we've done on this podcast is we've kind of taken the time to detail certain archaeological or ancient sites or mysterious sites around the world, and this is one of them. It's called the artificial pipes at Mount Baigong. Okay, this is in China. I got old President for Life Xi Jinping's permission to talk about this.
Xi Jinping.
That's how you have to say it.
President for Life is Xi Jinping.
Greetings.
Okay, so I'm actually pulling this from Mind the Hive. So this is a great article they've got on this site. So iron pipes can be found running throughout Mount Baigong as if it was an apartment complex before they travel to and emerge out of the bottom of a nearby lake. Okay. Yeah, that those who examine the site are often left baffled or simply frustrated. The oddities which lead up to such feelings begin as curious parties make their way to the mountain. They first can't help but notice the incredibly inhospitable region they're traveling into. It seems illogical for habitation through our modern lens. Yet it also fits into a mold that's been developed by some of the other oldest known constructions, such as the Sky Caves, which is they have an article on the Sky Caves. They're called the Mustang Sky Caves, and yeah, they're really weird. They're like they dot these like sheer cliffs. They're way up high, and there are all these caves, and they were man-made for some reason, and nobody is really sure what the hell's going on with that. So they're an incredibly ancient and immense undertaking created by an unknown group of people inside a thoroughly inhospitable region. Visitors then begin to see the unusual rock formations that decorate the area around Baigong. The state-run news agency, Xinhua, describes these formations as, quote, strangely shaped stones, unquote. Look at these. They are freaking weird.
Wow, man, a bunch of standing stones.
Yeah. He says, they stand about like pillars, often in groups, their presence seemingly unnatural and contrary to normal geological workings. When viewed alongside images of menhirs and other such upright stone constructions found throughout the world, they appear even more artificial. Mount Baigong lies amongst these odd stones, though its appearance may be considered even stranger. It rises up alone beside two lakes and is closer in size to a hill. Chinese researchers examining the site have stated that it is artificial, a pyramid-style construction, or at least part of it is. This claim, as extraordinary as it sounds, has been gaining traction due to the recent discoveries, such as the immense and incredibly ancient pyramids found in Bosnia and Gunung Padang in Indonesia. In both cases, the pyramids were thought to have just been natural formations, as they simply appeared too big and far too old to have been the work of man, but this understanding is changing. Here's some more pictures of the rocks. Look at that, it's crazy. 3 caves with triangular entrances exist in Baigong. That's one of them. I mean, that's not a cave.
That's freaking cool.
Yeah. 2 of the entrances are now covered in rubble and can't be explored, but inside the third, iron pipes can be seen traveling symmetrically along the floor and on the ceiling. Another cut-off pipe is visible coming directly up from the floor. The layout is reminiscent of what a modern room might look like without its walls, with the infrastructure exposed. The iron pipes travel throughout Baigong. Many are in groups heading in straight lines towards the same direction. Some are quite large in width and others are very small. A series leads from Baigong to a nearby lake where some emerge from the bottom and others emerge at the shore. The lake they lead to is one of 2 next to the mountain, though mysteriously one of the lakes contains salt water and the other is fresh water. Even more mysteriously, a geological researcher from the China Earthquake Administration named Zheng Jiandong told state-run newspaper People's Daily in 2007 that the pipes him and his team examined were found to be highly radioactive. But this is one of the last pieces of information to surface regarding this site. In 2002, the year when it suddenly gained mainstream attention, 2 different groups set out to investigate the site, one consisting of 9 Chinese scientists, the other consisting of 20 investigators from various fields. But strangely enough, no further information has ever surfaced regarding these investigations or their findings. This is particularly concerning since China has a record of masking ancient constructions. There are hundreds of pyramids, some massive, were denied until recently, and no examinations have yet to be announced. Some were even seen to have had a form of tree planted all over their surface, that tree having an aggressive root system which will hasten the destruction of the sites.
Dang it.
And they have some pictures of the Chinese pyramids here. And look at this picture. Like this is so the pyramids in the background. Look at that, like embedded in the rock.
Is that the pipe?
I don't know what it is. It's not one of the pipes though. It's not in the right it's not in the right place. Attempts to classify the pipes as natural quickly falter before the incredibly artificial nature of their existence. Their arrangement alone, with so many moving in the same direction and in straight lines, is an immense hurdle for skeptics to overcome. Many efforts to explain the pipes as natural have fallen. The latest is a theory which, and I remember this, a theory which says that they may be the result of tree roots which have undergone a natural process which has eventually turned them into the complex of neatly arranged iron pipes we see today. Yeah. Though this theory has struggled to gain traction as it cannot account for the straight lines or hollow nature of the pipes. As well, the thermoluminescence was used to date them, a technique that examines crystalline formations to discover when they were last exposed to sunlight or heat. 150,000 years is the finding.
Oh my god.
And this wouldn't seem to align with the idea that they were formed underground via roots, because obviously those were never exposed to light. Additionally, high content of silicon dioxide and calcium oxide in the pipes means that the iron pipes have been interacting with the surrounding material for a very long time. Now they have another picture here that's fascinating. This is one of the heavily degraded pipes that's coming out of the wall, but look at all the symbols etched into the stone around it from people who have found it before. If you find the idea of this site being artificial to be far-fetched or just impossible, please consider looking into some of the other discoveries that have been made in recent years which corroborate a far different understanding of human history than what our world's currently accepted theory states.
Yeah.
Such discoveries also align with what civilizations such as the Maya, the Hindu, the Egyptians, and Sumerians understood. A discovery like this wouldn't seem at all strange in their eyes. They believe that advanced civilizations existed long, long before them.
Yep. So immediately when you were talking about the two different lakes, like one of them is salt water and the other one,
I know. I started thinking of power.
There's like pipes going around.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking desalination plant.
Yeah.
Like they were taking the salt water and running it through some process to purify it, and then that's what the other lake is filled with.
Could be. Or I was also thinking of a power plant type of thing. Like you've got this potential, right?
Yeah.
Like salt water's an electrolyte, and you've got this other. I don't know. It's weird that it goes. All these pipes are going. Like I think of them more rather than coming from the mountain to the lakes. I think of them as being in the lakes and coming up into the mountain to do something in there.
That's what I was thinking. Like the mountain, the caves and shit go into the mountain where the desalination plant was or whatever, and they're just like processing the water so they have fresh water.
Yeah. I remember people saying like, "Oh, it's just tree roots. They're fossilized tree roots."
Yeah, are you talking about that? Tree roots.
Tree roots.
Hollow tree roots running in parallel lines.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. From the mountain to the lake.
Yeah, that's badass.
Yeah. So you've been looking at this idea of places where men become gods.
Yeah. I'm listening to Fingerprints of the Gods again, and
you have to say it like this: Fingerprints of the Gods.
Yeah. I've been listening to Fingerprints of the Gods again. It's a great book, man. There's just a lot of information in there it's like you never get tired of listening to it because it's like I can't memorize all of it. So every time I listen to it, I
there's
hear
new stuff.
More stuff, or it just reminds me of stuff and that I'm thinking about it a different way, which is what happened here. But he was going, Graham Hancock was talking about how the legends surrounding like certain ancient sites, like the Great Pyramid and stuff, are said to be the places where men become gods. And I think I'm not sure if we were talking about this idea in the last episode or whatever, but the idea that the Greeks named gods after the planets, or they have these names of gods and they have these personified versions of them where it's a person and he's doing all this stuff, but it's actually really they're drawing from a more ancient source that was referring to the planet. Yeah. And they're always personifying these things and telling the story in a way that is human or connected to humans. So Teotihuacan, birthplace of the gods, or where gods are born. There's just a whole bunch of these. So it occurred to me that taking that idea that gods are or were, the idea that was attached to the word gods was that they were a heavenly body. In other words, they were in space, in outer space. There's also the legends of like the serpent in the sky, or God came down,
Yeah.
and caused all kinds of mayhem. And we've talked about how that's a comet or
Yeah.
a meteor impact or something. So the idea is that these great sites in this legend where men become gods was simply stating that this is where man can go into space.
Right.
Like we have in the past at some point gone into space in this place. So it would be like very much in the Sitchin way of looking at things, like these massive sites were spaceports, basically. And then another connection that I made to that was the Tower of Babel connection, where we've talked about this before. Like they just got out of the flood, this massive cataclysm that wiped everybody out, and it's like 600 years later, and they're trying to figure out.
Greetings.
There's this idea in some of the legends where the people were angry at the fact that they were stuck on the land, and subject to the gods' whims, right?
Yeah.
So continuing with this idea that gods are just these chunks of rock from outer space or the planets or whatever, like it makes sense that they would be angry that they can't go up there. The kingdom of heaven is not for them.
Yeah.
They can't go to
for
space.
these fucking rocks, but not for me.
Right, and that we're subject to the whims of what these space rocks are, whether they're going to come down and just wipe us out or not.
Yeah.
So they decide to build a tower whose top will reach the heavens.
Yeah.
And so Babel ultimately would have been a place where men become gods, and that was part of the legend that men had become. So the sort of the translation that's been made is that man became evil because he was trying to become God.
Right.
But if you think about it in this way, it's simple. That no, we just wanted to become like them. In other words, that we could be up there in space.
Right.
And so what happens in that story is that, some space rock is coming down and seeing what man's doing, and it's like giving sort of agency to this chunk of rock by the rock looking down and seeing that we're going to build this tower, and if we can reach the heavens, then we'll become like them. So it comes down and wipes us out again.
Right.
And I think when I was telling you this originally, you pointed out that what was it?
That they had learned that they could hurt them, right?
Okay, that was another aspect of it. Yeah, like there was the story where the guy threw the spear and then it
Blood
it
fell from the angel, yeah.
So the idea was that, like, what if they had been working on a way to like stop these impacts?
There was some flat earther out there with his steam-powered spear.
Yeah, and he figured out that they could actually do something about it, and so that's what got everybody, in the mode of like, okay, let's actually do this, and like we'll go up there and figure out how to stop it. There was another line of thinking too that I had with this, and I think it was a Tower of Babel thing, but.
Well, I know you were also talking about the Bin Bin stone and the Pyramidians.
Yeah, that was today. The Bin Bin stone is this
Incredibly
ancient legend in Egypt, and it's apparently it was like it's been connected with iron. They talk a lot about iron, and iron at the time it is assumed that was not a metal that they were making, but the only source they had for iron was meteorites.
Yeah.
So they were. It was called something like that, like the metal of God, or something that translates to something like that. So they had. I don't remember exactly what the deal was, but there was an idea of this ancient legend that the Bin Bin stone used to sit on top of a rock pillar, and it was able to, I think, transverse, like go into outer space and come down. But that's of course not the translation. It can teleport man into the land of the gods or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's the idea where the on top of the obelisk there's the little pyramidion, because it was basically, that was the shape of it. And so the obelisk is the main body of the obelisk is the stone pillar atop which the Bin Bin stone sits, and so there's the little pyramidion on top.
Yeah, and the famous, it was supposed to be kept in Heliopolis, which is it's lost now that city no longer exists or whatever, but I've seen I can't remember if they were carvings or drawings. We were talking about this too, where like the Ben stone looks like a kind of it's either a small pyramid or a cone-shaped object. But on one side, there's like this carving where it looks like a person coming out of a doorway.
Yeah.
Right, there's an open door in the side of this cone object, and it's carved in stone. So what you're seeing is like in high relief, a person's face and their arms protruding out of this square-shaped opening in the.
Yeah.
It's
so the basic idea, looking at it through this lens, is like the Ben stone was made of iron. It came from outer space, so it was like It was a metal ship.
Yeah.
And there was an opening where a man could get inside and become God, right? Go to the land of the gods or the land of millions of years or whatever. Yeah. I remember what the other connection was. I started thinking about, because the story of Babel and the story of Adam and Eve to me are so similar.
Yeah.
I immediately ran this, idea through the story of Adam and Eve, and it occurred to me that basically the idea is that Adam and Eve first sought knowledge, right? They took the fruit of the tree of knowledge.
Yeah.
And once they had that, if they then took from the fruit of the tree of life, then they would become like us, is basically what God's saying. So looking at it again through that lens, the tree of life seems to be the ability to go to space.
Right.
And that ties into the story we had reported on before about the astronaut who had gone into outer space, and he'd been up there for like a year or whatever, and his telomeres were getting longer. And it's like, like these are the things in our genetic, like the whole situation biologically, that the telomeres like getting shorter and shorter is what causes us to be our lives to be the length that they are. So if you can grow your telomeres, then you could possibly live longer.
Yeah, exactly.
So the idea that reaching, and then this also correlates to the idea that heaven is a place where you live eternally.
Right.
Whereas everywhere you look in the ancient texts, when they're talking about the heavens, it isn't this mythical place. It's up.
It's space, yeah.
It's always up.
Yeah.
And when things come down from heaven, they're coming out of the sky.
Right.
And all of these ancient legends and traditions that have to do with things coming down from the sky and fire and all this destruction and all this crazy shit, it's like more and more I'm thinking of these different stories and the way we're translating them in terms of astronomical events. So the idea that the tree of life or like living forever in heaven is actually a reality. Like if we can get up there, we can actually live for long periods of time.
So there is physical immortality, because like I think on like episode 4 we decided that there wasn't. I was like, God damn it.
Well, okay, so like look at the story of Gilgamesh. Like when he's seeking immortality, he has to go to this place where men become gods.
Right. He goes to Baalbek,
Right, Baalbek, which is the way Sitchin had translated this as a spaceport.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's built on the same enormous scale, yeah.
He's been poo-pooed and stuff about that because it's like, well, if these aliens had such incredible technology that they could travel, hundreds of thousands of light years to get here, why would they need a landing strip and shit?
Why were they using 1970s style rockets?
What if they weren't aliens? What if they were humans? And we know that there have been that. Well, we don't know, but we're talking about the impact hypothesis, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. And then fingerprints of the gods. The premise is that there is this lost civilization that we're seeing the fingerprints of in many of these ancient sites around the world.
Yeah, and all of the most ancient cultures talk about a precursor civilization that was incredibly advanced.
Right.
It's really very old.
So what if we did have 1970s, space technology 12, 15,000 years ago?
Exactly.
And the story of the Tower of Babel is true in a sense that they figured out, hey, we can stop this or we can do something about it.
And they were just a little
too late. Like before Babel, maybe they had done this before, which is, we're looking at sites we don't really know how old they are, but what if they were sites where maybe they were the center of technology, and that technology reached a point to where men were able to go into outer space, and the way that is translated today in the way it was preserved back then, we're translating that as then became gods, because gods are what are in outer space. Like when we look up and we see the stars. This is the other thing in Egypt. They believed that we would become stars.
Yeah.
Right? That it's like there's a strange idea that this pyramid is some device that has the ability to transform the dead body of a pharaoh into a star.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of a quant stuff. Really what it was is that, like, no, this site is the center of technology in a place where they had figured out or developed the technology to take men into outer space. And thus, that's where this strange, translation today comes from, that they became gods. Well, if gods are
objects in
outer space, then that's all it is, that we were able to do that.
Yeah.
And then that would explain a lot of things, like that this idea of UFOs, or that visitors from outer space, or like they beam down some hologram to talk to somebody and tell them to go find some ancient shit somewhere.
Yeah.
It's like if say 15,000 years ago up to 12,000 years ago, we figured out how to go to outer space, and they knew at the time that some cataclysm was going to happen. We had been obsessed with the sky. We had been obsessed with the cosmos for how many thousands of years because of this type of shit. They were building these sites that align, like what we're doing with the Hill Hinge project.
Yeah.
Like they're figuring out that there are these cycles, and these cycles of destruction, cycles of catastrophe, like with Randall Carlson's work.
Yeah.
And they figure out a way to go to space, and they do it to escape some cataclysm, and then later some of them come down and they land in particular places, and perhaps they don't have the ability to just like hover down here and then zip back into space. Like maybe it's when they send a pod down here, that's it.
Yeah.
Like they can't get back because all of their shit was destroyed.
Yeah. And I think of Oannes coming out of the water, right?
Yeah.
Think if so right after the cataclysm, when the Greek, when the people that lived on in the Greek area or whatever, because this is their legend of being taught civilization by this being, he comes out of the water wearing a fish suit.
Yeah.
And he goes back into the water. So like if he came crashing down in a pod, like a bin pod, right? and it's not quite like our Gemini pods where it's like this little bitty thing, but maybe he can live in it. So he goes back out to it he won't eat the food. Like they specifically said that while he was on land teaching, he would teach, but he would not eat or drink anything that they had on there. And it's like
it's like Viracocha, right?
Yeah, he's got this very specific diet, And like if they were out in space for a long time during the cataclysm and then waiting for the aftermath and waiting for everything to kind of calm down, like all their space genes got activated, so they were very different when they came back here.
Yeah,
they were tall
exactly.
and they were weird. They had enormous eyes because the space is dark.
Yeah. But that was the idea too, is that like if they did some like emissary or whatever down here to like try to see who was still alive or like help out whatever was going on, how long did they wait? Like it could have been they're not going to come down immediately,
right?
But so this I don't know. I'm just like I'm on this new freaking path where like I'm going back and looking at all this same shit with this idea in mind, and it just seems to plug in so seamlessly into these ancient myths. There was another connection I was going to make too. What was it? Something about them coming down in glory. Oh, like I don't remember.
I also like.
There's a whole bunch of them.
While you think about it, I was going to say like the Tower of Babel story is not confined to the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely.
In Fingerprints of the Gods, he discusses a Babel story that was found in Mexico, like where that was recorded by the freaking monks or whatever. Like where the guy, and it was talking about what is the name of the?
There's Babel stories all over the world.
Yeah,
like
they're like the flood stories. We haven't found as many as we have found the flood stories, but Babel stories are basically about men building this enormous thing, a tower of some kind or an enormous kind of construction, and that they were all able to speak to each other, and they were cooperating to build this enormous thing, and they were doing it in order to become like the gods, to get to space, that the top of it was going to reach the heavens. All that kind of shit is all in there, and then that it's destroyed by the gods to keep men from becoming like gods.
Right, which is a sort of personification again of what's going on. It's giving agency to this rock.
Animist.
Yeah.
It could be animist. Like it's either
it's like the same way that they talk about Jupiter and Mars and Saturn. All they give them all these human attributes.
Right. And that could either be
a sort of will that determines what they're going to do. Well, this person's personality is thus, so they make these decisions. Well, it's like when you're looking at what Jupiter does in the sky, and that it occasionally throws shit at us. Yeah. Right? It's like this evil god that wants to destroy us from time to time.
And that's what I'm saying. That's either a teaching aid of some kind, if you look at the way the ancients sort of personified everything like that, that kind of can be viewed as a teaching aid, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it also could be viewed from an animist perspective, that it wasn't a teaching aid. This is just how they saw the universe.
How they saw the universe, that everything did have a sort of will and a desire to do what its nature was.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's actually, I mean, in thousands of years, if a future civilization was looking through some physics papers, they might get that idea.
Yeah.
From us talking about what atoms do.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. And that they're following laws.
Right. The atoms never want to stop moving. They always want to move.
That's right.
Right? They want to.
Atoms.
Yeah. The first man.
Yeah. That's right. Everything's made of atoms.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I think that's a really cool idea, and maybe I'm sure it's been thought of, but
I don't think it's been thought of quite like that. I've seen a lot of people talk about the places where men become gods, and I've never seen any reference. I mean, Sitchin has talked about some places being spaceports.
Yeah.
But I've never seen him make the connection of becoming God means going to space.
This is the other thing I think about too when looking at things like this. Like this word that we have, God and gods.
God.
We made that word up, right? So I don't think that there was ever a being that came down and was just like, "Hey, I'm God." Right?
Yeah.
But
my name
because that would be like a being coming down and saying, "Hey, I am Nachnish."
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? We get the idea of what that name means based on what the thing does.
Right.
And so then when we say the name, it is associated with the thing, and that's what gives us the idea of the nature of the thing. So when you say the word God or gods, what is it that you think that is associated with that? And it's like all of the associations are given to us, but in context through learning these ancient texts. So we've created, and I shouldn't say we, I created this contextual understanding of the meaning of the word God, right? Being like learning religion, and all that kind of stuff. So looking at ancient texts just as like these are just texts that were written by men in ancient times, and we found them, and we're trying to translate them. But at the same time, we've had oral traditions that have also given context to these words that have come down. So when we find some like ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and we start trying to translate them, we decide that what they're saying about these guys is that they were gods.
Yeah.
The Egyptians didn't say they were gods.
Right.
We are putting that word, and we think we have a meaning for it because it's been passed down to us contextually through these religions that we've practiced and stuff. So we've given, the gods of Egypt, or their pantheon of gods, our own contextual meaning that is based on our lives. And I'm trying to erase that. Like I don't know what the word God means, right? That's where I start.
Yeah.
But I see the connections in all of these translations that our time people have translated into God. And yet I see the connections to that it was a thing in space. A thing in space over and over and over. And so it just falls into place that like if a man becomes God, then he must be in space.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah. And I mean, and Brett is pointing this out too, that like being in space gives you this kind of omnipotent view. Like you can see everything.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like God is like he sees all. Like what was it saying? Like not even like he notices even the sparrow falling or whatever the fuck. Like he sees everything. Well, yeah, we put satellites up in space because that gives us a godlike view, right?
Right.
You could see everything. Like Google Earth is badass.
The sun can see everything.
That's
because,
right.
Yeah. Anyway.
And it lights everything it looks at. That's right. It's helpful.
Right. But that was just really cool, like thinking about the idea of the tree of life. And we had just, got into that story, that recent story about the astronaut. And I was just like, oh my God, there it is. Like,
Yeah.
we sought knowledge to become like God. And if we then were able to get the tree of life, then we would be like him.
Yeah.
Or like them.
Yeah.
So it's like and then you look at all these ancient sites that are just all focused at the sky.
Right.
So it's like seeking the knowledge of God to become like God is looking at the heavens.
Yeah.
Trying to discern the motions of the heavens. And there's this idea too of like, we were discussing this in terms of astrology, that this is telling the future. The heavens know the future in that all of their paths are set. Everything is in motion. And so there's this, the past and the future is all written.
Yeah, like we've talked about this before. I think the way the ancients looked at destiny and fate,
Yeah.
and like that in the ancient Sumerian, destiny was synonymous with orbit, like in terms of like Jupiter's destiny
Right.
was its orbit around the sun, right? That was its destiny, and then like there's also something about this with the me, the sacred
The weapons, yeah.
yeah, the weapons or the tablets, whatever they were that Enki had. To
They were
control
like
everything.
these powerful tools. And,
Yeah,
Yeah.
the May, and they controlled, they like outlined the destiny of things, right? And there's the idea that you can't change your destiny, but you can change your fate, right? The destiny is set, right?
Yeah.
But the fate can be changed, and so like our destiny, as a race, is the orbit of the Earth, but we can change our fate by like leaving it. At least we'll still be in the orbit, right, going around the
Right.
sun. But if we're not on the planet, that's changing the fate.
Oh, okay. I remember you just reminded me of another connection. The idea of the afterlife. When looking at it in the context of like of cataclysms, that the idea that the dead pharaoh can live forever in the heavens, the idea that death is on earth and that life is in the heavens is because they knew that these cataclysms happened. These people that had suffered cataclysms, and so the idea that everlasting life was in the heavens with the gods,
Yeah.
and that death was on earth was their realization that we seem to lack today, that we are going to perish here. We are going to be
Yeah.
destroyed. And so the only way to receive, so it wasn't that we get it after we die. The thing that died was our existence on earth
Yeah.
gets wiped out. And so we have everlasting life after that death in the world of the gods, if we can get there.
Yeah.
And so there's these rules and things you must do
Yeah.
in order to get there. Like there's a way that we could become all of one language and build something badass enough to like take us to heaven, before the death, because the death is going to happen. So the death is on earth because this cataclysm happens and it wipes everything out, but we can live after in the kingdom of heaven.
That makes me think about the as above, so below. Like, could it be that they were constantly trying to bring the heavens down here to make, like, what is the idea of like heaven on earth? That we could live forever here, and if they could mirror the heavens, you see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying. I think we're kind of talking about the same thing, like the idea of building these structures that we're mapping the motions of the stars. We're telling them our destiny and our fate, and that we could alter the fate by stopping a destruction, right?
Yes.
So so we had to have heaven on earth. Like, in other words, we had to make Earth a place where we could live forever as a species.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, we had to be like gods, because we had to go up there and control what was going on.
Yeah. Let us make a name for ourselves.
Right. So the idea that there's this sort of this translation about man's activity that is given this sort of evil notion that we can be gods, I think is a serious mistranslation of what was going on.
Yeah, or a quant stuff, like of a failure to understand what the ancients were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
And then a misconception of why the destructions happened, right?
Right.
Like they're saying, like, so the men wanted to do this, and then God shows up and is like, well, blah blah blah, let's destroy them, and then people construe that as like, well, the men must have been evil, right? And that's not what they were saying. And I've tried to point this out a lot of times. Like in the Babel story, there is no indication of any evil doing.
Right.
You know, it doesn't say that they were killing people or that they were slaughtering innocents or anything like that. They just said, well, let's build this. Let's do this so that we are not scattered across the face of the earth. And I'm like, what's wrong with that goal? Why is that bad? You know?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I do agree with you that it's a serious mistranslation or a misunderstanding of the story.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got to take another break real quick.
Oh yeah.
And hell yeah, snakes in space.
Ready. Yep, we're building our hinge. We're gonna go to space. We got it started. One pole.
One pole. Hitching post with the sun.
That's right. Going to space. Our pyramids tied behind our backs just to make it square. This is Snake Bros. Welcome back. Second hour. First segment of the second hour. And I want to kind of continue on this conversation we've been having because I'd had a couple. Well, we had a long discussion about it during the break, and I've one thing that occurred to me is the weird period in Egypt with Akhenaten and the worship of the Aten. There's some more recent research that has come to light, and they're illustrating the research with images of all of the friezes, the high relief friezes that were found in the city of Aten that Akhenaten built. So just to give you some background, Akhenaten is this weird longhead that came to rule over Egypt, and he kind of he in this really strange move, because like Egypt had always been like a, what do you call it, they were pantheistic. They were, you know, they worshipped many gods, right?
Multiple space rocks.
Yeah. So Akhenaten shows up and he's like, no, there's only one. Okay, and this is one of the first, aside from Zoroastrianism, like this is one of the first, and these may correlate actually, the Zoroastrianism and Akhenaten. This is the very first known monotheistic practice, right? And so he had this city that he basically said, like, we're going to leave Heliopolis, we're going to leave all these places that have traditionally been the centers of Egypt, the centers of worship, and everything like that. And he like just abolished all the old religions, and you know what, we don't even know if they were religions, but what they call now religions, these priesthoods and these, you know, maybe they were brotherhoods or schools, who knows what they were.
Yeah.
But he was like, well, all those don't matter. Now it's just the Aten, and we will worship the Aten. And he just moves, they go out in the middle of nowhere and build a city. Okay, they construct this enormous city, and he rules there for, not very long, 13 years, 15 years maybe, before everything kind of falls apart. Now, this new research is pointing to the idea that the Aten is not the sun, because that kind of doesn't really make any sense. The sun is always there, and there's no reason, really, there's no really good reason to assume that he just abolished all of the old ideas and practices of Egypt and said, we're going to worship this other thing that we've always had anyway. Right? It doesn't really make sense. So what they're suggesting, and they're doing, and they're illustrating this with these pictures, is they're saying that, so like one of the most well-known of Akhenaten is he's sitting. It's a typical Egyptian thing where, you know, it's from the side. He's sitting and he's holding his hands up, and Nefertiti, his wife with the long head, she's also got a really long head, she's sitting up opposite him, and interestingly they're the same size, which is like, there's this weird thing where the Egyptologists, and this may be because of where Egypt is, but the Egyptologists tend to, like, they point out that Akhenaten's wife is given the same importance as him in the friezes because she's the same size, right? And this is abnormal. If you look at all the other pharaohs' depictions or whatever, their wives are always these little girls, like little bitty, just like, you know, like small things next to them, and they're huge, right? Well, in all the pictures of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, they're the same size.
Yeah.
And this famous frieze has him, and they're both holding their what look like children, babies.
Yeah.
And they're kind of holding them up, and there's this disc in the sky and these rays coming down, right? And they all appear to be collecting or basking in or whatever the rays. So this new research is suggesting that is a comet. That the Aten was a comet, and this is why he changed everything. He was like, look, suddenly this is the only god. It was so fucking bright and so enormous in the sky that you could see it during the day. And like the sun is up there, but the sun doesn't have this enormous long tail that goes all the way across the sky. So suddenly this comet is bigger than the sun.
Yeah.
It eclipses all gods, right? So Akhenaten is like, holy shit. And it was close, okay? So
That's the only one that matters, right?
right. So what's interesting to me, and I don't think this was suggested in the research, but the other thing about when they're looking at Akhenaten, so Akhenaten was, it looks like they attempted to erase him from the records, okay? But I don't think that's what happened. I think the comet erased them from the records. Okay? His city, the city that they moved out there and they built this badass city to live in to worship the Aten. Like, if you read the Egyptological explanations of it, they say that eventually Akhenaten was deposed, his city was razed to the ground, raised flat, right? And they actually said that like that people were enslaved in order to do this because they like physically like flattened the whole thing. And I'm like, no, what if that comet actually hit and caused a cataclysm?
Of it did, at
and
least.
yeah, and caused a cataclysm or whatever, and it like literally flattened the city and destroyed. You know, and so when the civilization reforms, they're like, well, that wasn't the right thing to worship, and they go back to the other, right? Because it destroyed them. So that made me think of that because of what you're talking about. Like, this was a god, and he shows up and he's like, I am the only one.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, there's a picture of it. The Akhenaten and Nefertiti worshiping the Aten with their children, or basking in the rays of the Aten, right? So if that was a comet, that was huge because the tail is
And it's
spreading.
got the little serpent in the middle of it.
Yeah, yeah, and the tail is spreading out. So like when a comet gets really close, the tail will spread out and get wider. If the comet is past Earth, right, then you'll have this disc, and then the tail gets wider and smaller, right? And there's an appearance of rays. Like I've seen all these pictures where they're showing how these comets in the sky have, like, the tails would come off and they're multiple streams.
Yeah.
And they look like rays. So that's one idea. Like,
That's cool. So I was, during the break we were talking about this, and this goes along with the idea that we get this contextual definition of what God is. Well, there's another contextual definition of what worship is, and like where do we get this concept? I can't find an origin for a thing that's commanding worship.
yeah.
Right? But if we're mistranslating what worship is, and so one of the points I was saying is like in the future civilizations studying ours will be like, yeah, they worship the atom, right? they would go into these buildings like all night long,
Yeah.
and they would bow down before the atom and worship it. And it's like, no, that was a fucking scientist in a lab looking at a microscope, like trying to figure shit out, right? And he
Yeah.
was writing ancient texts.
Yeah.
He wrote this scripture that was inspired by the worship of the atom. And it's like, no,
No,
dude, it's
no.
like-
Stop quantum.
he didn't go, he went into a cave and God spoke to him. And
Yeah.
he was and he worshipped the guy. And it's like, no, maybe he was doing research
Yeah.
on this comet.
And he was in the cave because the comet was coming.
Right. So this is what I was thinking while you were telling that story, is that Aten, like this whole idea that he had to get rid of the pantheon of gods, and they stopped worshiping those and they went to worship this other one. It was like they were doing all this astronomical research.
Yeah.
And they were researching all the objects, and then this other object comes in and they're like, okay, we got to focus on this one now.
Right. It's coming really close. Yeah.
And so they stop all of their research and their study of these other gods, space rocks, and they start studying / worshiping the new god, the
Yeah.
new space rock.
Yeah, and for a while, and it was coming so close. Like, they realized that it was such a danger that it became the only thing that they studied for a long time. Because
Right.
they were like, what do we do about this? Yeah, so it becomes the only god, the monotheism.
But there are a lot of these things that you can do with these ideas that we have about these ancient texts. It's just like plug in this other idea. Like we don't really know whether they were what worship meant to them Like this idea of worship that we have, what is it? Like, can you even define it?
Yeah.
How do you worship God? Right?
You just think about him and
And
sing.
just love and sing. And, yeah, it's like, well, okay, but you could. It's easy to see how like the intense research and study of something could be misconstrued by a totally alien culture.
Yeah.
As this sort of strange, not really fully defined idea of worship that we have.
And
Things that aren't really fully defined and understood.
And previous to the at least the modern incarnation of writing, music was the preferred method of passing down oral history.
Yeah, so you had to play the organ in order to worship.
Right. So singing was a form of study.
Yeah,
Singing the songs of your culture was how you learned their knowledge.
right. And that would be construed as like everybody's in the quote unquote temple worshiping the old gods because they're singing they're learning.
Sing a song about the Southland.
But that's the thing. Like we have these ideas that are so ingrained in our society. Even atheists that are archaeologists today, when they find some ancient structure, they're like, "Oh, it was a temple where they worshipped the blah 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 god." And you're like, "How do you what?"
Yeah.
Like
I don't know, therefore temple.
everything is a temple.
Whoa.
It's like,
Sounds like we're about to get destroyed by the gods.
yeah, the gods are mad. We're being totally blasphemous.
Blasphemous
in
to
here,
the
and
gods.
We're gonna get struck by lightning.
So I had
There you go, Velikovsky, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
gods will strike you down, right?
That's
So
right.
this freaking planet comes nearby and the
Yeah, oh yeah.
arc.
Yeah, the
Lightning bolt.
thunderbolts, yeah. The electric universe hypothesis.
But that's another thing, like God striking you down with a bolt of lightning. Because why? Because the bolt of lightning came from the sky.
Yeah. So it must be from God. Like that guy in the Old Testament that jacked off and they got struck by lightning. Right? And that from then on, like no one can jack
spilled
off.
a seed.
No one can jack off after that. You just fucking, it's against God. So I've along this line of thinking too. I've always looked at the idea of sacrifice, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, you know, there's this weird shit in the like in all these ancient texts about sacrificing to the gods. Well, if the gods' primary thing that they did was kill everything, then maybe the idea of sacrifice is like, this is what they want, right? People think this is
Yeah.
what gods want. They want death. This is how you get their
So
attention.
a quant stuff of the original ideas.
Right. So like the gods are these bodies in space. Sometimes they impact the earth and they fucking wipe out almost everything. So gods must want death. So the idea, so to get to, and it's the death of innocence.
Yeah.
You know, so you take a lamb or a child, you know, or whatever, and you kill it and you shed its blood to get God's attention. The idea of sacrifice, because like when God shows up on Earth, He kills everything. So like this is a sort of an appeasement.
I see.
And so the Aztecs and the Inca that were like sacrificing, you know, we've talked about this before, how they thought they were holding off the next destruction,
Right.
by shedding blood of innocence to keep God from coming in, you know. And this is what a lot of the old gods were considered to be. What you see from the depictions of them, they have the tongue sticking out and it's a blade. That they considered them to drink the blood or to be cannibalistic. That they consumed life. So like, because they caused death and destruction, right?
Yeah.
So, and then further along that line of thinking, you have the idea of the burnt sacrifice. Well, some of these cataclysms caused enormous global firestorms. So, right, you kill the thing and then you set it on fire, and the smoke is appeasing to God, because this is what God wants, obviously, because every time He comes down here, He freaking kills everything, sets everything on fire.
Yeah. Yeah, Brett's pointing out the Nova at the time of the birth of Christ, who was a god who didn't demand sacrifice. Not yet.
Not yet. It'll show up eventually.
Yeah, and then there's the whole idea of the war, you know, the wars of gods, right? They're like, we're observing the heavens and like, you know, Shoemaker Levy 9
Yeah.
is the war of gods.
Yeah.
They're attacking each other. And then the ancient Sumerian creation myths that are talking about these planets battling it out, and they're giving them all this this, you know, what do you call it? Animism.
Yeah.
Like they're having a war.
Yeah, Tiamat, the old mother, goes crazy. She starts forming generals, which is like she's like moons.
Yeah.
Like something was happening to the planet itself, and it was disintegrating or something like that. It was coming apart.
I imagine that story being a vast timeline where her moons are being created over eons.
Yeah, but it was saying that she was extruding them.
Yeah, like they came.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
catastrophic to a planet, no matter what, right?
Yeah.
And she makes like 5 of them. And Kingu being the biggest one, but she makes like.
But they couldn't have been there to witness it, you know. It's
No,
like
yeah, no. I think it's the. I mean, I got the idea that it was the story that the Anunnaki told to the Sumerians as the explanation for the formation of the solar system.
Right.
Marduk, like after Nibiru, after vanquishing Tiamat, it said he took half of her body and made the firmament, the asteroid belt, and then
Right.
the other half and worked wonders. He built the Earth.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, there was the other thing I was thinking about was the, you know, Shimyaza or whatever in the
Yeah.
200 that came down.
The Fallen.
Right, the Fallen. They're either so there's like two possible. I guess there's more than two, but
Oh yeah, think about.
the two main ideas that I have are one that, you know, before men became gods. In other words, before men went into space. You know, it was all these actions of these gods coming down from space or whatever. So the idea of the Fallen, and they're turned into like these demons, and they taught man all types of spells and magic and metals,
Yeah.
and all this kind of shit. So what do you have? Like you have some impacts. They come down and they, you know, that's the birthplace of the gods or whatever, like
Yeah.
where they came and they came down to Earth or whatever, and men go over there and they figure out like all this science. You know, they start worshiping this, studying them,
Oh yeah,
and they figure out how to make metals and all kinds of shit, do magic.
Yeah, so the when we were going through the Grail stuff, the platinum group metals that come down with some of these comets,
Yeah.
how they like make our DNA like into superconductors, and like think if like people went to an impact site and actually evolved, like literally had shit plug into their DNA and change them, and then they could do magic.
Yeah. What would be considered magic at the time, right? Yeah.
Or just I don't
Actual
know.
magic.
Yeah, like actual magic is in using the existing laws of the universe to change stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's what magic is, right? Like, if you listen to Gordon White, he's saying like, so there's these basic, all forms of magic fall into these basic categories. One is like affecting probability by intent, right? Using your, like when you're making sigils, the point of like that focuses your intentions into something, and because we can sit down next to a random number generator and kind of change it, that we can sort of do this to the universe. We can interact with it in this way. So you focus your intention for something into a sigil, and that sort of shifts probability slightly in your favor, right?
Yeah.
So that's magic, you know. And then the other main form of magic is divination, right? Or far-seeing of any kind, far-seeing into the future, far-seeing, and so this is remote viewing. Everybody can do it. Like apparently, like the governments and shit have learned, like you can teach pretty much anybody how to do this.
Yeah.
With a few things, like, so that's magic. And then the other one is contacting the spirit world. And then they do all the rest. Like, the most powerful magics are summonings, right? So you summon something, and then it shows up, and you form a pact with it if you're doing everything right, and then it will do what you want because you're giving it something. It's a trade.
Yeah.
So is it possible that people learned these things, or became open to the understanding of these things because of of crazy like changes to their DNA that happened when they got around these impact sites?
Yeah. I was thinking I'm not saying anything about that, but I was imagining like the impact sites become a center of scientific development, technological development, a center of knowledge.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
But I mean, you look at the stuff that the Fallen were supposed to teach mankind, and some of it you're like, how do you learn that from an impact? It must be making some kind of changes to the people,
Yeah, it
or
could
something.
be.
You know, like the one that teaches them how to like paint the eyes and use makeup to be hot, and like the other one that teaches you how to do libations, pouring.
well, there was charcoal, bro. And they got it on their faces, and they were like, "Whoa, baby." I can really see your eyes now. It's getting hot in here.
Libations, like pouring, pouring oil and stuff. There's a lot of weird things that people learn from the fall of it.
Yeah. I know. Still, I'm just talking about the basic idea that the Fallen were impacts. Like,
yeah. And then if you think of the idea of Shimyaza, he's supposedly chained to a temple of stone deep beneath the desert or something like that. So he's an impact crater hidden underneath the sands of a desert.
Oh yeah. Holy shit.
Because you could view the crater structure, this crystalline, impact structure full of nanodiamonds as being a temple.
Dude, that would be fucking crazy.
Especially if a temple is a place of study. It's a lab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is, regardless, right?
Yeah.
It's a place of study.
Irregardlessly.
But, dude, it would be crazy. Like, you just made me think that underneath the sand of the Sahara, like, if we were able to just, like, scoop all the sand out of there, it's just a massive freaking, like, impact craters all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's just because it wiped everything out, it just turned into desert, and the sand just kind of blew around and filled in all the holes.
Yeah, filled in everything, yeah. Yep.
Dude, that'd be
That's
nuts.
probably exactly what it is.
War of the Gods.
Yeah. That's why you got to worship the Aten. There's some people that think that Akhenaten was contemporary with Moses too. So you have the beginnings of monotheism in like many different places. Zoroastrianism, in Egypt, and then Moses in the Exodus, right? And then we've talked about the idea that the Exodus, like all of the curses or the plagues or whatever, were caused by some impact event.
Yep.
The gods are saying
kill
no.
us. Please don't kill us.
Dear God, please don't kill us.
Please don't wipe my hard drive with a claw. Hey. Sorry. Whoops.
Oh, man. We were talking about the hard drive thing reminded me of this. We were talking about I think you were saying something about solid state drives and ancient technology, right?
Yeah, I was having a conversation with Brett
Yeah.
about this. Yeah.
And
That's a good topic, man.
yeah, like I've thought this for a while that like, because so often you'll get the where are the pot shards kind of question, like, well, if there was an advanced civilization, where's the evidence?
Where's the pottery?
Yeah, where are the computers? Where are the fucking skyscrapers? Where, and like that shit. Like one thing we found with technology is the more advanced it gets, the more ephemeral it is. Like the less, like the shorter amount of time it lasts, right? Like your phone is not going to survive 10,000 years.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it was, I've kind of gone through this before with the whole example with the phone and the backhoe and then the ancient stone hammer, right?
Yeah.
Like you leave all those on a hillside and everybody dies. Well, in a week the phone is useless, and in a day its battery is dead. And in 5,000 years the backhoe is going to be unidentifiable without forensics, and you have to know what you're looking for. It'll be weird bits of metal and strange fluids that are embedded into the ground. You'll have to use forensics to find it, and you have to know that you are looking for a backhoe in order to understand what you're seeing. And in 10,000 years, the forensics won't even be able to find it, and your phone will be long gone, but that stone fucking hammer will still be there and still look exactly like it did.
Yeah.
So, like, the idea that we're gonna find... Now, you can have it, like... Just like with fossils, where... Like, you have something like a jellyfish that has no bones, and yet it'll be preserved perfectly as an imprint in this sedimentary rock, to where we can see it down to the molecular structure, or not molecular, but the cellular structure of it. Those are really extraordinary circumstances, but I think that we found stuff like that and haven't recognized it, because it's one thing to see a life form, but technology is totally different.
Yeah.
And how would some 19th century archaeologist recognize a solid state hard drive if he found one embedded in stone somewhere? He wouldn't fucking know what it was.
Right.
And there was the book that I was reading that
So it's like the more advanced we get in technology, the more probable it is that we will actually find something, but it's still extremely
right.
low
And
probability.
I'm afraid that the probability is that we found a lot of it and none of it was recognized or it was destroyed. I mean, like, okay, the crystal skull is a good example of this. Now, this one's still around, right? The Mitchell Hedges skull. It has light pipes in it. Like, it does weird things. Like, first of all, the way it's made is, like, impossible, right? I mean, there are ideas of, like, generations and generations of people were, like, rubbing it very carefully with sand in order to get it so that it doesn't have any tool marks on it. You're just like, whatever, dude. Why would they do that?
We need Christopher Dunn to look at it.
Now that looks like a human skull. But if you look at a circle around this eyeball, and then you grab that circle on the nose, they intersect. That's complex geometry.
Yeah, and they're all the same diameter or whatever.
That's not just generations of people saying, that looks like a human skull.
Yeah. And they made it against the grain. Like we have a lot of crystal technology now. We're very Atlantean in that sense that we use crystal technology everywhere, right? But we usually will grow our crystals if we need them because we want them to be perfectly pure, right? So there's no flaws. But the other thing is if we're forming them into something, you go with the grain. Just like when you're sanding a piece of wood, you want to go with the lines in the wood because if you go against it, it's just gonna, it's gonna make it all ragged and shit like that. Yeah. But if you go with the grain, you can make it very smooth and beautiful. Well, with crystal, there's a grain, and if you try to work it against the grain, the danger is you're going to shatter it, and it's really easy to do because crystal cleaves, right?
Yeah.
So if you're working it against the grain, one mistake and the whole thing just shatters. But the way the grain is running through the skull, it's running like in the wrong way for it to have been built. Going with the grain, it's like totally against it, which is very strange. So, but the other thing, like I said, it has light pipes. If you take the skull, the jaw is removable. So if you take the bottom jaw off of it, that means you can set it down to where the place in a regular human skull where the what is it called? The spinal column comes up through the back of the skull.
Yeah.
So if you can take the jaw off the Mitchell Hedges skull and you set it down, and that spot on the back of the skull where the spinal column would come up through, anything that's below it right there, like so if let's say you set it down on a map, right, a map on the table, and you set this skull down on the map, and then you looked in the eyes, you would see projected through the eyes the spot on the map that's going, okay?
That's freaking badass.
So the crystal basically carries that light upwards from there and then reflects it this way and projects it out through the eyes. That's fucking technology, okay? And this is
Or
one of
biology.
that crystal is alive. It wants to tell you about that map. So, like, I think that type of thing is technology, and there are many other crystal skulls that have been found in Latin America and around the world, but none of them are like this one. And I see those as being like later cultures attempting to copy this technology from this incredibly ancient source, right? And the sort of the way that like the obelisks may be a reproduction of something technological, a tower with a ship on the top of it or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's badass. Didn't they say something about the skull being able to like contain a bunch of information or something?
Yeah,
or were they just talking about crystal technology?
Yeah, crystal.
Because that's what we were saying too. Is that like I've heard many times like people talking about how our technology is not like everything is perishable in this way, or like our hard drive is going to get wiped and then it's all over. I've heard this idea espoused many times, and I'm thinking like, yeah, but our crystal technology is getting better and better,
Yeah.
and that shit's going to last.
Right.
Brett and I were having a discussion about how, I was pointing out that I think this is the case, that like, an EMP or that kind of shit wouldn't wipe out, a solid state drive. It would wipe out the components, the electrical components in it or whatever, but the information stored on the
and the molecular structure of the crystal would
would remain
if you could read it. Yeah.
Right. The idea is like, how do you read it?
Yeah. Like even if the thumb drive survived for thousands of years, and it was perfectly intact, like how would they? All the stuff to read that thumb drive is very fucking specific to our particular, not just circuitry, but the way the computers work and the operating systems and everything. Like the files that are on. So even if they could plug it into something and it would read it, how would they know what the files were? Like, well, what is the format that they're put in? Like, it's once the data becomes like that, it becomes almost impossible to retrieve if you don't have something from that civilization explaining how to do it.
Yeah, that's what Brett was pointing out. And so what he was originally saying is that we need to like move back towards like these methods of building things and whatever to preserve our knowledge.
Yeah. So we need to like carve everything into stone.
So my point was that like, well, what we could do instead is focus on trying to build something similar to the pyramid that's like a puzzle. That the ultimate answer is how you read this hard drive that's like buried in its center in a secret, by the time they get to it, if they didn't just blast it apart with bombs and shit, that hopefully they would have understood enough to where they could actually like read this thing. So one of the ideas, like this made me think of vinyl, right?
Yeah.
Where we can put information on a record.
Yeah.
And the way to extract it is very simple. It's like rudimentary.
Yeah.
You take a little point, whatever, a
shard of
little
diamond.
megaphone, and
Yeah.
then you spin it, and it makes the noise.
Yeah.
So that type of thing would be like something in the setup, right? And like it would have to be, obviously, a primitive culture wouldn't be able to get the information off the hard drive, but the building, like the pyramid, would drive that culture into a situation where they start to advance.
Yeah.
So this is like what the pyramid seems to be, it's a puzzle designed for people to attract people. It's so freaking huge. It's like, what do we do with this? We can't even destroy it, like until you get to a point where like civilization is advanced enough to where we start recognizing patterns in it that are more sophisticated, and those drive us to more and more sophisticated understanding until we eventually get to a point to where we can understand what the fuck the pyramid is. And we're not there yet. Like we haven't got it all figured out. So maybe there is ultimately an answer, but we have to follow it, we have to continue working on the puzzle, and in doing so, we learn things and our technology advances and so on and so forth.
Or it could be just an attempt to jumpstart, like the survivors of the last cataclysm constructed these things all over the planet to try, because they knew that civilization was destroyed, that knowledge was lost, and they were the last ones, and they were going to die, and that was going to be it. And this maybe have happened many times before, and they're like, we're never, and their civilization was trying to stop it, and by the Tower of Babel story, didn't quite.
Yeah.
So they're like, we need a head start.
Yeah.
So they build these crazy structures all over the planet with their last years of life, the last gasp of their civilization, in order to make people look at them and go, what the fuck? And it jumpstarts civilization, and it like kind of like maybe the advancement will happen in 10,000 years instead of 30.
Right.
And then we'll be able to be at a place where we can stop it this time because we'll be advanced enough, whereas they were not quite there.
Yeah.
If they could jumpstart the next cycle.
Yeah, that's like maybe at one point they did make it, but they didn't make it enough to where they could actually stop it, but they escaped.
Yeah.
And so then that's where you get the stories of Viracocha, that they come back down, they try to jumpstart civilization again all over the world.
Yeah, and then they leave these structures for people to find.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're getting dumped on over here. All right, we gotta take one more break.
Yeah, one more break. And then we'll come back and we'll finish it out with the Dyatlov Pass mystery. Oh no.
Don't tell me about it. Are there snakes involved?
There's lots of snakes.
No. Wait. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's my turn to do an intro again, and I forgot. But welcome back to Snake Bros, Brothers of the Serpent podcast. We're changing the gears here. We're going to talk about some scary shit.
That's right.
Enough with the gods, folks.
Those aren't scary enough. Giant cataclysms, meh.
Yeah. Let's just talk about a really small cataclysm.
Yeah, let's talk about some hikers that died. So this was in February 1959, okay, in the Ural Mountains. This is like in Russia, Siberia. There were 9 hikers. They were really experienced, like mountaineers, basically people. They've done these kind of hikes many times. They were college students. They were young. They were extremely healthy, very fit, and they took off. The last place that they stopped was a small town. It was like kind of the last town on their route, and then they went up into the Urals and basically were doing this specific trail. There's not really a trail there, but they were hiking from there to across this enormous like wilderness wasteland expanse of ice and snow in the middle of February in Siberia. Jesus. Yeah, so it's kind of hammerhead stuff, but they were.
Let's go hiking!
Yeah, whoa, yeah! Hiking in Ukraine!
Crazy, man.
So it was the leader of the team was a guy named Igor Dyatlov, okay? So they took off and then they weren't heard from, like they were supposed to show up I think in like 2 weeks in the next place that they were supposed to stop in, the next village, which was across this whole mountain area that they were going through, and they didn't show up. So eventually people went out there to find out where they were, if they needed help, and they were all dead. And they had been dead, they had been dead for a while. Like they basically were, I think, on the 3rd or 4th day. Like, so they were. So this is basically the idea. I've got this pulled up on here, and it's pointing out a bunch of strange things that were found. Okay, so the first thing they point out is that the 9 hikers who were killed on the trip through the Urals were exceedingly experienced, which made their unexpected death in the wilderness one that raised many questions. They were all graduate students. They were taking a break from their studies. A trip to the summit of Mount Orotin, or Ortotin, was a perfect excursion. They were all considered to be hardy, fit, and competent hikers. The trip to the summit should have been well within their ability. Being comfortable with the trek ahead, the group documented their trip with their cameras. Photographs from the start show happy-go-lucky friends on an adventure. One can see rugged people smiling, wading through snow in full health, and climbing effortlessly. And there's lots of pictures of them, they're just having a grand old time out there in the middle of the frozen wilderness, right? They don't look uncomfortable at all. They're in their element, really. They've done this many, many times. So, whatever spooked the hikers on that fateful night. So they camped, okay, and some of the weird things about the camping, they set up their tent. They just had one tent for 9 people. So it was a big fucking tent. Okay, and this is in 1959, so we're not talking about like polar gear here. They've got old school canvas,
Yeah.
They didn't have any fleece, they're all bundled up with all these, and it's old school Russian shit too. So it's like, but they were well prepared. But when the investigators found the tent, first of all, just to put this off right at the start, there was no avalanche. Like a lot of people are like, it was an avalanche. It's not an avalanche. The tent was on top of the snow. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you see the pictures that the investigators took, the tent material itself is collapsed flat, but the 2 tent poles are standing up straight. It's not an avalanche, right? Okay. But what was weird?
What if it missed the tent?
Yeah. People are like, well, the avalanche was below them. I'm like, then it wouldn't have killed them. I'm sorry. Well, the cloud would have come up. Yeah, they wouldn't have died. Okay. But this is what happened. Whatever spooked the hikers that fateful night caused them to perform many erratic actions. One of the most confusing was the cutting of their tent and the leaving of important items. The tent was cut open from the inside. Many researchers have asked the question, what could make these campers so frightened that instead of simply opening the tent, they were forced to quickly cut holes to escape? So they slashed their way...
Like multiple holes in it?
Yeah, so that they got all like, out into the frozen night. Like, not wearing their gear. They left most of their cold... Because they were like, getting ready for bed and shit. They ran out there in their underwear with just socks on, no shirts. I mean, dude, like, they slashed their way out of the tent and ran out into the night undressed in the middle of the night in Siberia in February in the mountains.
There were no bodies in the tent?
No.
It'd be one thing if there was like a couple of bodies in the tent,
Right.
horrific deaths, then there were slashes and people ran out.
Yeah.
Because like something crazy was going on inside.
Right. So, along with their apparent need to create an immediate escape point, the hikers left almost all of their material goods, including cold weather gear, in the tent. In February, the Ural Mountains have an average temperature of 16.6 degrees Celsius, which is 2.1 degrees Fahrenheit. 2 degrees. They left.
Maybe they were practicing the Windhoff method.
They left
I'm warm.
They left jackets, gloves, pants, and other warm clothing, and as well as navigation supplies such as compasses. The tent also contained 3 axes and 2 finished knives. Even with items that could be used as weapons, the hikers still fled in a terrified panic. Strangely, one hiker, Simeon Zolotaryov, fled the tent without any clothing or gear, but he took his camera. In the middle of winter, 9 experienced hikers became so frightened of some unknown threat that they risked hypothermia and exposure to escape a terrible fate. When the thought of freezing was better than an imminent death, one must ask, what could be that frightening? Okay, so number 8, state of undress. Based on the findings within the tent, the researchers note that the hikers left nearly all their belongings behind. When the bodies were finally located, research teams soon discovered that 5 of them were nearly naked, wearing merely undergarments and in a few cases socks. And you can see, like, this is a picture of 2 of the frozen, like, he's just wearing boxers.
Damn.
Yeah, so let's see. Researchers were perplexed as to why these people who were very familiar with the weather in Russia, more specifically the Ural Mountains, would have left themselves so exposed to the elements. Many believe that the lack of clothing on the victims was a case of paradoxical undressing. I'm just going to leave that where it lies. A macabre discovery was made as more corpses began to be found within the snow. The 4 other hikers were found nearly completely clothed. Upon investigation of the photographs taken by the students, it was discovered that these hikers had confiscated clothes of their deceased companions. Clothing comparisons show that the last 4 people took the clothes off of their dead friends in a last-ditched effort to stay warm and survive in the extreme cold, which kind of, like, right there just destroys the idea of paradoxical undressing.
Yeah.
Having to scavenge the corpses of your companions adds to the dread of already being pursued by a threat that has no real identity.
Yeah, because why wouldn't they just go back to the tent?
Yeah. That's a big question. As if things weren't already weird enough, once search parties started discovering the bodies of the hikers, they found that each person had inconsistent injuries. Different people suffered different injuries, though they were all fleeing apparently from the same unknown assailant. The first 2 team members discovered were, and I'm not going to be able to read their names, but one of them was named, these guys were both named Yuri, okay? Yuri something and Yuri something. They were the victims found closest to the tent. Their hands were brutalized severely. They resembled bloody masses. A tree near their bodies revealed chunks of human flesh embedded in cracks in the bark. The men were apparently so terrified that they tore their hands up in an attempt to climb the tree to a safer place. Igor Dyatlov was found shortly after, and his state of unrest was just as unnerving. He was lying on his back, and his corpse was found with his jacket unbuttoned and both of his hands clenched tightly to his chest, and his face was covered with minor abrasions. Rustem Slobodin was found, and his corpse presented a new and devastating injury. Along with other minor scrapes, his skull was fractured severely. A 6 centimeter or 2.4 inch fracture split the left side of his head. Despite this injury, experts were still convinced that he died of hypothermia. Zenaida was found to have suffered many injuries to her face, but her hands took the brunt of the damage. Abrasions and frostbite ravaged the girl's hands and phalanges. Let's see. 2 months went by before the other hikers were discovered in the snowy Urals because they had gone a lot farther. Their injuries were just as odd. Nikolai was discovered well dressed under the layers of snow, but his skull had been bashed in. His jaw and skull suffered severe fractures. What is most peculiar is that there was no visible outside damage. The severe injuries on the inside could not be easily identified via basic observation of the body. So his skull was crushed and his jaw was crushed, but you couldn't tell, like, from looking at it. Like, there were no obvious giant, like, contusions and shit like that, you know, like big bruises and stuff. The injuries on Alexander and Semyon were even stranger. Semyon was missing his eyes and the soft tissue near the ocular area. His skull showed a wide wound and his chest was so compressed that it spread and broke his ribs. Alexander was missing soft tissues near his eyes, and on his skull, along with an open wound, was in the skull behind the ear. Okay. The most shocking discovery was made when the searchers found the body of the last hiker, Ludmila. She was discovered with all the soft tissues missing from most of her face. Both her eyes were missing and her nose had been completely crushed. Her mouth was positioned in an open, screaming position, and upon closer inspection, it was found that her tongue had been removed from her body. Now, people had suggested that the tongue and all the facial stuff and everything to these people happened after they died. But the thing is,
by scavengers.
right? But the thing is that the Ural Mountains during this period, there aren't any animals. They're all either hibernating. And people were like, well, birds pick up. Well, there's no birds in February in the Urals. They're all gone south. They don't stay there, right? But she was found face down. So you can't, no birds are picking the eyes or whatever. The other thing is her stomach was full of blood, which means that her tongue was pulled out when she was still alive.
Oh, my God.
Okay? Experts are still unclear as to why each body was so drastically different in terms of their injuries. The big question is still, what could have caused them? Okay. Medical examiners had a big job ahead of them while examining the bodies. From missing tongues to cranial fractures, it was easy to view what had happened to these individuals. However, no matter what happened externally, the cause of death was always ruled as hypothermia. Yes, many suffer from frostbite and hypothermia, but that may not have been the immediate cause of death for all of them. The other explanation written down was that a, quote, unknown compelling force, quote, unquote, was used to injure and kill the hikers in the Ural Mountains. Now, this is the Soviet-Russian investigators writing this, an unknown compelling force. But that's all that was said. There is no plausible indication of what the force was, be it avalanche or any other happening that could have occurred. It was, however, noted that some of the victims had injuries similar to car crashes. Research on the compelling force simply ended with a few scribbled words in an autopsy file. Did the examiners know more information that was not available? So, the next weird thing is the case was closed abruptly. After examination of the bodies were done and the compelling force was stirring in the air with investigators, the case of the Dyatlov Pass hikers was closed almost immediately. Russian government officials took all documentation about the case and possible causes of death and sealed them by issuing a government resolution. Before adding the Dyatlov Pass incident to the realm of cold cases, investigators did try to come up with some explanation as to what happened to the hikers. Attempts at reenacting what happened that tragic night were performed without any real questions being answered. Dead ends and disappointments led to quick closing of the case. However, the compelling force was once again raised its unnerving head as the official case files for the incident claimed that this force was the reason for the deaths. Due to the lack of compelling evidence and the hush-hush tones of the government and its investigators, the Dyatlov Pass incident quickly became fodder for conspiracy theories and produced an increased thirst to know what happened to them. So the next thing is radiation. Things took an even stranger turn in the investigation of the Dyatlov Pass incident when it was discovered that the clothes of the hikers contained extremely high levels of radiation. The campsite, too, upon further exploration, gave off large amounts of radiation as well. Many members of the hikers' families also noted that during funeral services, the bodies of their lost loved ones appeared to be giving off an unnatural orange color or glow, and some of their hair had turned gray. The orange coloration was thought to be due to intense radiation at the scene of their deaths. Now, Brett, I wanted to ask you this: didn't they used to use iodine? When they were in radiation cases, and iodine turns your skin like this bright orange color, right?
Yeah.
So I was wondering, maybe the initial investigators detected all this radiation coming off the body and they covered them in iodine because they didn't want to get irradiated. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, it's an orangish brown. Yeah. So being that this was time for new voyages into the realm of nuclear weapons, it was thought that perhaps the hikers had come across some Russian testing zone leading to their deaths. Russian authorities, however, assured that no testing was going on in the area, and another speculated...
Of course not.
Yeah, of course they're not testing anything nuclear. Another speculated explanation for the radiation found on the hikers and in the area was from the environmental makeup. That's just ridiculous. The mountain is just spewing out radiation. Did the hikers come upon some unknown military site only to become unexpected victims of nuclear testing? If no testing was occurring, how did these hikers become so irradiated that it essentially changed the chemical makeup of their skin and hair? Though a military explanation may seem almost likely, the hikers were found without external damage, which would account for a radiation blast. The radiation, like so many other aspects of the incident, is still a mystery. Okay, so this is one of the last things. Lights in the sky. During the night of the tragedy, there was even more weirdness happening in the skies above the students. Another set of hikers, who were some distance away from the Dyatlov Pass group, claimed to have seen multiple strange orange spheres hovering in the northern sky. During the 6 weeks, these spheres were a common occurrence in the surrounding areas. In addition, Lev Ivanov, who was in charge of the investigation at Dyatlov Pass, noted in his report at the time that the tops of the trees around the hikers in their campsite was charred and burned.
Holy shit.
During this era, the thought of UFOs causing this sort of damage was unheard of and highly unbelievable, but Ivanov put these strange occurrences into his records. He kept up his research into the possible relationship between the UFOs and the Dyatlov Pass incident and met struggles the entire way. He was prevented from looking at any KGB documents about the investigation. In an interview he gave during the 1990s, Ivanov claimed he was pressured by many Russian officials to doctor and repeal from his records any information about UFOs in relation to this case. Okay, let's see. And then they make a connection here between cattle mutilations and the types of injuries seen on the faces with the soft tissues removed and the tongue. The Dyatlov Pass hikers took many cameras with them on their adventure, and most of the photos were completely normal pictures of the group, of nature and the campsite and of various other images. However, one photograph has proven to be of great intrigue to investigators. The last image on one of the cameras shows a bright object moving against a dark background. This image has notoriously been called the 33rd frame. What makes the taking of this photograph even more interesting is its discovery after the death of the hikers. Upon examination of the tent, okay, so this is the tent again, researchers found that the camera was on an improvised tripod. The lens cap was open and the camera was ready to shoot. The hikers had sat for a time and premeditated the setting up of this tripod and camera before they made their infamous and terrified escape from the tent.
Was the tripod inside the tent? Or?
Yeah. So some people have speculated, because some of the slashes in the tent were horizontal, so some people think they were cutting little slits to look out at something outside, and then they had set up a tripod to try to get a picture of it, and then something terrified them, and they just fucking tore out the tent.
Weird.
Yeah,
Weird.
This is the photo, the last one.
What does that line mean?
I don't know.
Dude, that's weird, man. That's freaky.
Yeah, so that's the Dyatlov Pass story.
So he's saying, Brett's saying potassium iodine is a stable non-radioactive salt. Its presence blocks radioactive iodine. Orange glow from iodine not too likely.
Well, what is that orange shit that they smear on you at the hospital before they stick you with a needle?
I don't know.
I thought that was iodine.
Yeah, but it does kind of look orange to me. But
That's what I'm saying. It's orange. It makes your skin like a bright orange color. And it's supposedly some kind of disinfectant or something. I don't know. And that's what I thought I remember reading in some old science fiction that they're like asking if you had iodine pills. Did you have your radiation? You would take these things. So I was thinking maybe their skin color was orange because of that, because it was an old supposed remedy for being irradiated.
What you're thinking of is called betadine. It's a disinfectant solution, the stuff that they swab you with, like with a little clamp and a cotton swab to dip it in it.
Yeah.
Betadine's another form of iodine.
So it's iodine.
Chemically put together differently. But it is iodine, yes.
And it turned you orange. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, fair enough. It's not the one they use for the radiation therapy, but yeah.
So the radiation therapy stuff was like, was something it had different colors. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's actually a salt, potassium iodide. So like whenever you see like Morton salt and it'll say on the side of it like iodized salt.
Yeah.
It's because it's had iodine added. It blocks radioactive iodine from getting to the thyroid. That's your gland that is most sensitive to radioactive iodine in the blood.
They were Russians. They were probably using the wrong stuff. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, chances are.
Yeah, well, it was just an idea, so... Yeah, I put the two. I knew one was iodine, and then I remembered somebody saying something about iodine pills with radioactivity, and I was like, well, that shit turns you orange, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's as good an explanation as I'm sure anybody else has come up with.
But
I was originally thinking that I really had nothing, so yours was better than mine.
But the hair turning gray is a common, you know, that is something that can definitely happen with being irradiated. It's just like
Yeah, that's a definite sign of radiation sickness.
Yeah.
Or like poisoning.
And that will happen after, like, posthumously?
Yeah, because
That will happen posthumously?
yeah, because your hair and your hair and your nails continue to kind of grow for a couple of weeks after you died. So the hair can definitely turn gray. And I mean, like, it doesn't start turning gray from the roots. Like we'll turn all gray all at once.
Huh. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm wondering, like, there weren't any burns on their bodies at all.
No, and they
Because I was wondering if the wounds were like self-inflicted because something was happening where they were like
that's
like
that's
freaking out because they were feeling some crazy shit. Like, so if they're in the tent and it starts getting hot,
Yeah.
and they're like, what's going on?
like it's burning them or whatever, and they're like,
Yeah. At first they're like stripping off more of their clothing because, like, dude, when you're camping out in 0 degree temperature, like, you don't get down to your underwear really.
Yeah.
Because the tent's fucking cold as shit.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just imagining, like, being in that situation. Anytime I've been camping in extreme cold, like,
you put all your clothes on and then you get in the sleeping bag.
yeah, you can get in the sleeping bag. Like, sometimes, yeah, I'd get in the sleeping bag, but then if I took clothes off, it would be inside the sleeping bag.
Yeah.
But in 1 degrees, 1 degree weather,
Yeah.
I don't think I'd be taking off my clothes. But
The other thing that they didn't mention in this that I was reading is how far from the tent that they went.
yeah, that's what I was gonna.
They ran almost a mile, like through this deep ass fucking snow down the mountain. And the other thing is that I didn't mention is where they put the tent. Like, they're all experienced hikers, right? They're on this mountainside in the Urals. By the way, the name of the mountain in the native tongue means mountain of death. Just gonna put that out
great.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So there was a deep forest nearby with enormous trees, okay, and it was like, it's the kind of forest where, like, you go in there and the wind stops, and because it's so thick, the trees are huge, and the snow drifts are less, right? And they camped out in the open on this, like, enormous sort of slightly tilted flat plain where the wind must have been just like why did they do that? Like, this doesn't make any sense for experienced hikers. They should have. Why didn't they go up into the forest?
Well, I don't know. Sometimes if the wind's blowing real bad, you don't want to camp underneath the trees because they fall.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I don't think it was that bad. Like, it's just like the wind is going to be going like crazy out here, and it won't be in the forest.
Yeah.
It's a huge. I mean, the trees are enormous. It's taiga, so, like, a lot of people question this. Why did they camp out on the plain and not in the woods? And people were saying, well, they were afraid of the woods, is what it looked like. They were afraid to go in there. And it could be just what you said. They were afraid to go in there because the wind was too strong, and they didn't want to get hit by falling branches or whatever. But it's just really strange. Like, you camping out in an exposed area like that when you're, like, if you kind of look at the practices of people that do, high altitude, freezing weather, they don't camp in open, exposed areas. They kind of find, at least
type
some
of shelter.
Yeah, because it'll tear your tent up too.
Yeah.
So it looks like they were.
But did they ever find the tongue of that girl?
No.
It was just gone.
Yeah, and as well as the eyeballs and those other people. And then that one guy, dude, the one guy had his chest had been impacted so much that it crushed his ribs out like that.
Yeah.
Like it.
But they didn't show, like, bruising on the exterior.
Right.
It was just like,
Yeah.
yeah. I was thinking of, like, some weird, like, sudden vacuum or something.
Yeah. Yeah, sudden vacuum, like and
it crushes your skull, but it's not
right. It comes from the inside.
Yeah, it's the inside expanding.
Right.
It breaks it.
And the injuries to the face looks a lot like this cattle mutilation shit. They were very precise removals of weird soft tissues and stuff like that. With the, especially with the tongue. Like, if you look at cattle mutilations, they pulled the tongue and they pulled out all this soft tissue around the face and the eyeballs, and they would core out the anus, which didn't happen to any of these people. But, like, it's just the strangeness of the cattle mutilation cases. And in this weird thing in the middle of nowhere, when there's, like, lights in the sky and the tops of the trees are broken and burned, like, that's fucking weird.
Crazy UFO shit.
And so it's called Dyatlov. Like, they actually named the area after the guy who was heading the expedition. It's Dyatlov Pass.
That's terrible, man.
And the Russian government actually, like, closed the whole place down for almost a decade afterward. They didn't let anybody go there. And the reason I brought this up is because just recently in the news, another person has gone missing there. A hiker went out to Dyatlov Pass probably to look at the area, and he's gone.
How long ago?
I mean, this happened this week. I saw the headline and I was like, oh, I should bring up the old story in the podcast.
Oh man, I gotta follow that one, huh?
Yeah.
Eventually they'll send a expedition out to look for him, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's already people looking for him. Yeah. And I'm not sure if he was alone or not, but yeah, it was. I saw a missing hiker in Diablo Pass. So
Mountain of Death.
yeah, stay off the Mountain of Death, guys. They're named that for a reason.
Did we ever do that story about the what is it? Something Project Pat? Where the guy like goes into the cave in the mountains.
Oh, the Tatra Project.
Tatra Project, yeah.
No, we haven't. We need to do that one too. That one's
like-
in Romania. It's a
Yeah,
crazy
there's
story.
like some crazy ancient freaking thing inside that mountain.
yeah.
Some ancient.
It's World War II, and he's got the injured guy, and
Well, I was just thinking like that story, like compared to this
Oh,
one.
I
Like, there's
see.
some crazy ancient machine in there that just does
Yeah.
weird shit from time to time. It's still
Yeah.
running.
right, like the cauldrons.
Yeah.
Yeah. The old reindeer herders would said they were houses and you could stay in them overnight and they were nice and warm.
Yeah.
And it was radiation because they would always get sick and die afterwards. It was nice and warm in there.
That's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's storming and I don't want to lose the show, so I think even if we're not at time yet, I think we ought to call it.
Yeah, I think we're all right. Oh yeah, we're 11 minutes over.
311. It's a good band. Yep, so that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys for coming and listening to us again. This is episode 41.
Yep.
Angels and Demons and Gods and
Serpents.
trying to think of a name. What are we going to call this one? The Thunder Gods, something like that.
Angels and Demons and Monsters and Serpents.
So you guys can get a hold of us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. You can go to the blog and comment there, brothersoftheserpent.blogspot.com. If you have iTunes, you can go on iTunes. You can give us some good reviews, help people come to the show. We're going to start a thing where we, like, people who put reviews on there, we're going to read them on the show. We've got one to read. I intended to do it this week, but I totally forgot. Sorry about that.
I think I just saw a light blink.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and quit. Thank you guys very much. Good night, Adamu.
And check out Mind the Hive.
Yeah, run away from the thunder.
Yep.
Snakes.
Snakes.
Exile. I am from Cal-
We got shipments